Just want to welcome everybody once again. It's such a pleasure having you with us. Yet another edition of our weekly programs. One weekly programs, because we've got different versions of them now. And tonight we bring to you another very exciting conversation, exciting guests with us tonight. And of course, there's quite a lot going on within the polity, in the country nowadays. At least in the last 1 week, there have been quite a lot of things. One of the things that actually bear quite a lot of significance to the country itself is the fact that all of a sudden, of course, you have the Central Bank of Nigeria raising the MRR or MPR rates, and of course, that's got a lot of implications for us as a country. It's got a lot. A country that actually it's a consumption-oriented rather against a production-oriented country. It's also a country where quite a lot of activities are within the retail sector. And so there are quite a lot of things, a lot of questions that are being asked in this regard as to the propriety of it. And of course, around the world, it is a fact. Let's accept it. It is a fact that most central banks are actually able to raise rates to combat the escalating inflationary pressures. You've got the Federal Reserve in the United States, you've got the Bank of England, quite a lot of them are able to do this. And of course, you also got contradictory economic policies. For example, whilst the Bank of England, for example, is trying to put a downward pressure, on money supply allowances, trying to cut the inflation within the system. You also have a situation whereby you've got the government of the United Kingdom actually, initiating quite a lot of policies which by the very reason of their structure would actually increase. You're trying to reduce money supply, and this is trying to put a lot of course, there are a lot of things that tie to battling inflation as against just the because also when you talk about inflation, you're talking about you're talking about the supply side and the demand side, so quite a lot of this, and of course very important during the week as well. We also saw the pipelines from these did not look like fresh pipelines. These are pipelines that appear to be historical, that appear to be, and drawing on the resources of the country. And all these things, contributed together, and of course the president himself presented the 2020 appropriation bill before the two chambers of the National Assembly. So there are quite a lot of questions to be asked, and tonight we've got one of the best experts. You might have read quite a lot of articles by him, and I read a lot, and quite a lot of it. And I know this man is not probably, his life, his diary, they're not the ones who go by night, so basically you won't have them on the economic team and nonsense, but you have people, so who really has economics, and of course, it's not time as well. There are quite a lot of questions now that it's the simple answer to inflation. Simply increasing, just raising interest rates. You've got, and of course, the brilliant intervention by let me put it by the Commissioner of Finance, it is sustainable as well, where they challenge talking about the demand that this is all and everything. So, you don't have your time, we've got an expert in the house, and tonight, of course, the topic for tonight is the Convoluted Opaque Petroleum Subsidy regime, and of course, Looking at other economic policies, the impact on both the real sector, that is the productive sector, and income per capita. And finally, it is my pleasure to introduce our guest. He is an economist, a financial market aficionado, a public policy scholar. After a distinguished career in banking, he established global analytics consulting and international management finance and strategy firm with presence in Nigeria, United Arab Emirates, and the United Kingdom. The firm has been instrumental in the repositioning of private and public sector firms in Nigeria and beyond, as well as facilitating financial intermediation for hundreds of small and medium-scale enterprises. He is a member of the Institute of Directors and the president of the Institute of Service Excellence and Good Governance. He is a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants Nigeria and the Institute of Information Management, among others. He sits on the board of First Central Credit Bureau, Unit Insurance Brokers, and currently serves as chairman statutory audit committee at the Infrastructure Bank. He is also secretary board of editors at Daily Trust Group, as well as member body of experts for tertiary institutions entrepreneurship scheme and initiative of the Central Bank of Nigeria. As a writer, he keeps weekly columns in Daily Trust, Premium Times, and writes for the Hourly Reports. He has written thousands of newspaper articles as well as 10 books on the subject of Nigeria's economic challenges and central concerns. He is known to the solution focus. He was a candidate for president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria in 2019 elections on the platform of Affordable Nigeria Renewal Party, a political party that is champion. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Dr. Tope Fasua to the webinar. You're welcome, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure, and also I think I'll commend your group because very few people focus on anything intellectual in our climb amongst our people these days. And in fact, there's that cliched joke that we want to hide something from a black man, he put it in the book. So when you see outliers like your group who are concerned with intellectual discourse, is always a pleasure and a good surprise. So yeah, it is what it is. Thanks for the introduction. I'd also just dive into it now, and I have a slide to share. So can I share, please?
Yes, please. Go ahead, sir.
Right. So I quickly put together this group, just a few slides to guide the discourse, and I probably will go on for about maybe 45 minutes or so, and then we can have many questions from the audience. So I titled it Monetary Policy Rate Increases and the Subsidy Conundrum, just to cover the things that someone, I think maybe it's you, discussed with me on WhatsApp. Yeah. So some of those you have also discussed yourself just now. Some of the general concerns around the Nigerian economy, and in fact, perhaps anything that affects the Nigerian economy, you could as well broaden out. I hope I'm still audible.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope I'm still audible.
Very loud and clear.
Yeah, so most things Nigeria, you may still broaden out to the African continent in general, and probably you will see why this is so. So today we'll be discussing the meaning of some of these economic terms, NPI, CRL, what have you, and also their impact on growth in the real sector, and also production, productivity, and income per capita. And then we also look at the conundrum of subsidy as well. So essentially, The MPR is called the monetary policy rate. In different countries, they call it different names. They may call it policy rate, they may call it the bank rate, they may call it all sorts. But basically, it's just the indicative rate by which the central bank tries to tries to guide the economy. And in guiding the economy, what they're trying to do is to use that rate as a guide for the banks, okay, to pick up their own rates from that point, and also to tell the bank what the expectation of interest rate and inflation is, and so on. So in essence, that rate is a rate that is set by a committee under the auspices of the central bank. They incorporated a few guys from the outside as well, who are economists and so on. And this committee, when they will increase the rates, what they're trying to say is that banks should also increase their rates. And when they reduce the rates, that means that banks should reduce their rates. Of course, they don't force the banks to take a cue from that rate. And someone may argue that in a country like Nigeria, the policy rate is not as taken serious as it is elsewhere. One of the things we find out in Nigeria is that the banks tend to adjust their lending rates faster, and of course, maybe in fact all over the world. So if the central bank increases the rate by let's say 1%, for example, chances are that okay, fine. What you're trying to say is that lending rates will go up. In which case, the banks may put maybe 1.5% on lending rates. But also, savings rates will go up as well, maybe by 0.5%, but that hardly happens. So, what we see in Nigeria is a divergence, a huge divergence between lending and savings rates. Okay, so if you want to borrow money from the bank in Nigeria, they probably would slap on 30% or 35%. But if you put money in a savings account, in fact, the central bank had to force them recently to increase savings rate to 4%. They had to do by fiat. They had to write them and say this is what it is, because before then they had basically stopped giving anything on savings accounts or people's savings. Even if you put a fixed deposit in a bank for 90 days, you probably will give you 5% or 4% or 3% or something like ridiculous. So we look at 35% minus 3% on the average, we see the kind of margins that the banks are making, and of course everybody gives you the excuse and says, oh well, the country is tough, yeah, we have a lot of we're paying money for diesel. I mean, this is ridiculous sometimes, Had to take some of the banks up on that to say that this is a story of diesel. All of us are running diesel anyway, so how can nobody use that to justify a 30% spread? I mean, it's ridiculous. If you spoke about 30% spread in the international market, they'd be great to say, well, what kind of country is that, or what kind of economy is that? Anyhow, so that's what the NPR is, an indicative rate. And again, okay, let's do that. Then something like the CR, the cash reserve ratio. But basically, that's just the way of the central bank. Just basically saying that when the bank collects money from depositors, people paying their salaries into the bank and all of that stuff, the bank should not lend everything out. And don't tell us you've lent everything out. You have to sterilize some part of the money. So you have to put some part of the money in a kind of deposit at the central bank. That's why you're not able to touch. But if you run into trouble, you can always look at how much you have saved with the central bank and give something back. It's just a way of ensuring financial stability in the economy. So all of those then you have, of course, the liquidity ratio as well, which is another amount of money the bank has to sterilize with the central bank. Many times the banks complain about having to sterilize too much, but I think the reason why it's so is because of past experiences, and the second one believing that look, we need to by force, otherwise there's what is called a moral hazard. And moral hazard is a scenario where someone has too much money, and when you have too much money, you tend to misspend. And of course, the banks having a license, and in fact, someone will tell you that a banking license is a license to print money, because the banks are the ones that create money in a society. That's it. Not even the central bank. The banks are the ones that create money. And indeed, it is correct that a banking license is a license to print money. Because by giving loans, you can give you more loans than what you have in your vault. And then you need to do the run around to ensure you have deposits to cover your position. Sometimes you run to the central bank to get more money. That is the business. That's the business of banking, right? So all of those things occur. Like I said, lending rates are more active than savings rates. I think about 4.5%, if I'm not, 4% increase in the last three. I think it's 4% increase in the last three MPC meetings in Nigeria has been made. Of course, like the convener said, also this is not just a Nigerian phenomenon; it's also a phenomenon around the world. Rates are going up, and of course, the whole idea of the rate increases is that they central banks around the world intend to use this to curb inflation. So there's a classical economics idea that that there's an inverse relationship between interest rates and inflation, meaning that when interest rates go up, inflation goes down. When interest rates come down, inflation goes up. Is it a correlation or causality? Well, we don't have to go to that point. But what they're saying is that if you think that inflation is high in a country, you can increase interest rates and inflation will fall. How does that happen? That happens because when you increase interest rates, two things happen. People will no longer go to the banks to borrow money because interest rates become prohibitive, and so that's not a good time for people to say, oh, look, I want to start a small business. Let me go to the bank to borrow money. No, it's a bit prohibitive. So people will not establish more businesses. When they don't establish more businesses, that means there'll be less money in circulation. They're not employing people. Okay. And so there's been less money in circulation, chasing fewer goods or the same goods, and therefore inflation will go down, because inflation is a phenomenon where a lot of money is chasing few goods, and therefore prices have to go up as a result. But on the other flip side, also those who have excess liquidity, when interest rates are high, they take their money to the bank to save. Okay, because interest rates are high. They want to buy government bonds and all of that stuff, and in doing that, they are taking that money out of circulation and into the banking sector, into the vaults of the central bank. So the central bank can actually use that to mop up liquidity in society. But of course, is it true all the time? This neoclassical economics idea, it works more in developed economies and settled economies, matured economies. The link is very much well established than in economies like ours, okay? And they probably will see why as we go along. Also, sometimes you increase rates in order to attract foreign investment by surpassing inflation rates. So, so one of the things you do in, by increasing interest rates is to okay, let's see. Bad signal. Someone said it's raining as bad signal. Anyway, I'm still audible. Anyhow, so in increasing interest rates, you're trying to get foreign investors in. So there are two types of foreign investors. There's the foreign portfolio investor and the foreign direct investor. Foreign direct investors are the very desirable ones. They're the ones who come to your economy and establish companies, establish factories, invest long term, okay, in your country, in different parts of the economy, your country, sectors, and so on. But foreign portfolio investors are what they call hot money. Those are the smart boys from the city of London, from Canary Wharf. They move into your country. They're investing in the stock market or in the bond market and so on. But those boys are so smart, that of course, many times you can't game them. They're the ones that will game you. They move out en masse as well. Just as they move in en masse, they move out en masse. What we have seen is a scenario where Nigerian economic those who control the economy, managers, have been targeting foreign portfolio investment because they just want something. The truth is that there isn't much foreign direct investment coming into Nigeria, especially from established market. The truth is that for decades now, the Western countries have lost interest in a country like Nigeria in terms of coming to establish something that will stay. No, they don't. I mean, we have this problem with insecurity in the first place. You know, even before that happened, they had already got tired. You know what I'm saying? And what we have seen in recent times is only maybe the Chinese coming to help us with the rail system, with build our airports and so on. Some of those can be called foreign direct investment to a large extent. You know, some Indians establishing companies there and there, yeah, and also, you know, those kind of things. So foreign direct investment, we don't get a lot. Most of the foreign direct investment that comes into Nigeria go direct into the petroleum sector, where there's established, you know, processes by which they can make money. Many of the international oil companies, when they bring in money, they stand as foreign direct investment, and it goes into petroleum production and all. And of course, as anyone may know now, many of those guys have moved deep sea because of all the troubles with locals and local communities. They now do deep sea drilling and all of that, you know, and all the things that come with that. So the whole idea of increasing interest rates sometimes is also to ensure that the rate of interest in a country surpasses the rate of inflation in that country. Now, that's a huge challenge, as we'll see as we go on, because Nigeria's inflation is 20.52% as we speak, whereas the UK is about 10.1%, the US is about 10%, and so on. Also, the desire to curb consumption and increase investment and savings. I said that earlier on. You know, when you increase interest rate, people tend to take their money to the bank, and, you know, they tend to consume less. So as I said earlier, inflation is 20.53 in Nigeria as we speak, and inflation has increased steadily for more than 4 quarters now. Inflation has been increasing in leaps and bounds, and our own inflation jumps 1.7%, 1.8%, 2.1%, you know, to get to 20.52%, which is quite something, you know, quite significant. And also, insecurity are key issues for us, right? And as we will see as we go on, bad governance, COVID-19, as this happened. Number one, with insecurity, one of the key drivers of our inflation is food inflation. And you know, in this last quarter, food inflation was 23%. However, what you see called 20.52% is called the headline inflation. The headline inflation is like a weighted average of all the sectoral inflation. So from food inflation, manufacturing inflation, you know, all sorts of, you know, areas, rural inflation, urban inflation, all put together. What goes into the headline, into the newspaper, is what you're seeing, 20.52. One of indeed the highest part of that inflation is food inflation. And the reason why the food inflation is that high is because of insecurity. Farmers cannot go to farm. You know, they are disturbed, especially in the vast regions up north. But not only that, truth be told, also we haven't, I mean, there's so much unmanned spaces in Nigeria. We've only cultivated less than maybe 30% of our arable land. You know, Nigeria is vast and it's a great opportunity. And how would you know that when you get in the plane and fly around Nigeria, you realize that most of the land is fallow, you know. And like when you travel over Europe, over France, over England, when you get to rural area, you see that most places are cultivated, except their reserves, you know. You see that everywhere seems to be carved out neatly and all of that. In Nigeria, is basic, we just abandoned. And the moment the governments abandoned many spaces, criminals moved in. And of course, I've said that Nigeria is a playground for all sorts of criminals from even greater Africa, you know, all the way to Mali, Senegal, you know, Sudan, Libya. Also players are here doing all sorts of things that are making money. And so unfortunately, so bad governance is also part of it. COVID-19 was an issue. It was a time when, for the first time, perhaps in modern history, everybody was locked down, you know. In fact, the first time indeed, if you ask me, the first time ever, because not even in 1920 was everybody asked to sit at home, because now we are in a globalized economy. So this is the first time where we had a scenario where governments made dictations and said everybody sit at home, including farmers. So what happened then?
A lot of farm products went to waste. We're just trying to come back. Of course, the insecurity problem is still there, but we're just trying to come back, But so governments were spending, including Nigeria economy. And of course, when you're spending and giving money to people, of course, the corruption aspect is also there, whether the people are actually getting that money. But the bottom line is you're giving people money for doing nothing. And of course, a place like Central Bank did so much of intervention lending, okay, to say, oh, we want the economy to come back. We're giving money to farmers, we're giving money to aviation sector, manufacturing sector, all of that money we're chasing no increased productivity. So we weren't producing more, we're just spending. And of course, the same thing has happened in Europe, in America. And that's the reason why, for those who live in Europe amongst you, you're also seeing the inflation now. It is a reverberating effect of some of those monies that have been spent in a time when people were sitting at home and producing less. Companies were shut down. Many companies were operating at 10%, 5% capacity, and so on. There's a consequence for everything. So those are the reasons why we're having inflation. And, however, I say, what's the reality? Reality number one is that MPR increases or rate increases in general may not slow down inflation according to what the book says in Nigeria. In Nigeria, it may just not work. Yeah, and that's one of I'm a vanguard of, applied economics, that we should really think for ourselves. What works in Europe may not work in Nigeria. The settings are different. The variables may be different. Okay, the circumstances are certainly different. The cultures are different between Europe, America, Nigeria, and what have you. So we cannot do all this cut and paste. Just grab one policy off the textbook and slam onto Nigeria and Africa. It doesn't work. And why may this happen? Certainly it has not slowed down inflation. And in fact, the rate increase has not even attracted not even the foreign portfolio investors or increases in savings and investments. Okay, and certainly the rate increases may never surpass inflation. The more you increase the rates, you may see a scenario where you increase rates and inflation is increasing all the same. And this is because, you have to think about where is the inflation coming from. So why is it not slowing down inflation? Because the economy is not that linked. There's something they call in monetary policy, pass-through effects and so on, So it takes a while. There's what they call the transmission mechanism. So essentially speaking that, look, you may increase your interest rates, but inflation may not slow down because what is causing the inflation is different from what you're pursuing. Okay, so in Nigeria, what are the causes of inflation? Like I said, insecurity, people not being able to go to farm, food inflation. There's also imported inflation. Imported inflation because we are a largely import-dependent economy. Therefore, we're importing from all over the world. And all over the world, there's inflation. So we're importing their own inflation into our own economy and jamming it with our own inflation. It's debatable to see whether we're going to have a compounded effect of inflation or it's just going to be a straight line addition of the 10% inflation in Europe plus the 20% or whatever percent inflation in Nigeria to give you the final effect. But also, one of the key reasons we have inflation is the fact that we're import dependent. And it's largely a supply side also. The fact that cost of production has increased for the few companies that we have. Their cost of production has increased post-COVID. Remember that there's a very momentous thing that happened with COVID, that, the cost of shipping went up in some places almost times 10. I don't know, I don't know why that happened, but maybe when business slumped for shippers, or maybe at the time that the shippers realized that they were the only monopolies, they were the only ones moving things around. And I think even the US economy complained. I think I heard Joe Biden complain about this, that there are just a few shipping companies around the world, Maersk and a few others. And, these guys came together and jacked up the price. So if you want to afford them, so for a country like ours that's tightly linked with importation, you can imagine all the compounded effect. And this has not slowed down inflation because we're not looking at, where the inflation is coming from. Equally, may not have significantly assisted in getting FPIs in because, like I said, the boys that are in New York City, in Singapore, in the city of London, very smart people. They know a lot more about our country than we know. And so just by increasing your interest, it doesn't mean they're going to come rushing and so on, Yeah. And then, of course, there's what they call the lag effect. The fact that sometimes it's not when you make a policy that it becomes reality. Sometimes it takes time. For example, the inflation we're all seeing now is a result of, what happened 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 1.5 years ago. And sometimes things don't report very quickly. So maybe the increases in inflation, in interest rate in Nigeria will take that much time to come to fruition in terms of what they want to achieve. Or maybe the inflation itself may just trend down as a matter of time. Okay, so beyond the responding to your interest rate, it may just be that let's look at those same factors. If because Nigeria depends so much on importation, and we're importing other people's inflation and so on, and goods become more expensive. There could be a scenario where people locally get more incentivized to produce the same thing by way of import substitution. And if we're able to produce at a lower rate and lower cost, which hardly happens, then you may see a scenario where we stop importing that inflation, and that now will, depress our inflation to a certain extent. All sorts of things can happen. If the central bank is able to get back most of the monies that it pushed out by way of inflation back into its coffers, that is mopping off money in circulation that would have gone into mere consumption as well. Yeah. So, all right, let's keep on. And so I think this is the okay, 15.5. This is the MPR. Sorry, I didn't label this chart. This chart is the MPR. This is the over time, let's say about 1990s to date. So you can see that our MPR is at the highest in a long time, maybe since this record has been kept by Trading Economics, maybe in the 2000 or something, in 22 years. This is the first time I get into 15.5% in MPR. And, the CBN has said that they will continue to increase, or the MPC will continue to increase their MPR, or the interest rate, for as long as inflation trends up, which I personally don't agree with them, because the downside of increasing interest rates, like I said earlier, is that it becomes more expensive for companies to borrow from banks. And when companies find it difficult to borrow from banks, what they do is they downscale on operations. When they downscale, they drop plans to produce more, to open new units, new businesses, ideas. They lay off people, and listen, you may end up in economic recession. That's what may happen. And in fact, the World Bank has warned Nigeria that if they keep increasing the rates like that, we may end up in an economic recession. The question to ask is, are we already in an economic recession or even depression? Okay, well, long story. Maybe I'll be able to discuss that. This chart here is a chart for the inflation. You can see our inflation is like a 22-year high, and at 20.52 where it is presently, it's as bad as can be. In 2016, we went into we were in a recession as well. Inflation got as high as about 18.5% in 2016, 2017, as can be seen. This is the chart of our GDP growth. You can see that we've been in a recession twice, and in this regime, and unfortunately, but they'll be lucky if we don't get into a third recession before May 2023, which would be a record of be going into recession. And I think a lot of it is just caused by arrogance and ignorance, if you ask me, because when the government came, we oughtn't to have got into the first recession, and but some arrogant economic policies, not listening to the people, other braggadocio about you're the Messiah, the savior, you came to rescue Nigeria, did not make the gentleman to listen to reason, and they took some very brash decisions. And of course, the second recession was caused by COVID, and many economists went into recession. You can see that there's a projection Nigeria's economy may grow by 3.5% or thereabouts in 2023. We've done about 5% post-COVID, which is something that was caused, they call it a base effect. When you're coming from a negative position, sometimes, oh, okay, am I off?
You're on. We can, you're on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I stopped seeing you for a while. I thought I had gone off. So, so essentially, base effect and so on. So this is it. This is our growth rate. We had quite a bit of stability, 2011. But let me also say this quickly. This is mediocrity. Nigeria economy should not be growing at 3%, 4%, 5%. Nigeria economy, given where we are right now, should be growing at double digit. And if you look at some of the developed economies, they were growing that high when they were in the growth stage, all right? When I was running for president, I did quite a bit of that research and found out that in the 50s, there were times when the US economy was growing at 15%, 20%. In the roaring 90s, they were doing 10%, and so on. Even the UK economy was growing at 12% pre-Margaret Thatcher, and even during Margaret Thatcher, they achieved about 8%. So so there's that's it. So we should be doing a whole lot better than we are right now. Now Nigerian inflation, like I said before, is caused by large supply side issue, cost of production increases, global hike in shipping costs, import dependency. Global inflation is up by 50-year highs in Europe and America. COVID spending not backed by productivity, insecurity causing food inflation at 23%. So NPR increases can lead to further lending rate increases, of course, and of course, contraction of companies closing down in some cases. Unemployment may rise and economic recession. I said, are we already in depression? And what I mean by that is that, you see, the only time economic depression was used and accepted was in the 1930s. And that was a time when, the global economy was confounded. Some people put it down to the crash of the New York stock market in 1929, but it wasn't only that. Before then, there was what they call beggar thy neighbor policies. Countries were actually competing with themselves, and at some point in time, they stopped trading with each other. Everybody started looking inward, and in looking inward, that meant that you basically focus on, capping productivity and production in different aspects. So global productivity fell. And because countries thought that they could do without each other, I think it must have been an effect of the First World War and the continuation, the fact that that war had to be refought in 1939. And so 1930 to 1939, the world was in a global depression, what's called the Great Depression. Of course, when you hear this, it's basically the large economies that they were talking about. And since that time, nobody has accepted that their economy is in depression anymore. The most we hear is recession. And what is recession? Recession is anything that's more than 2 quarterly reductions in your GDP level. Let me say this. Nigeria's GDP is currently about $440 billion. But as of 2014, that same GDP was $540 billion. So Nigeria's GDP between 2014 to date has fallen by 100 billion. And why is that so? Devaluation. When a country devalues, your GDP falls. Simple. So okay, as we will see as we go along, the subsidy issue, is you don't combine such a policy with devaluation. Devaluation is a big issue. However, are we saying that Nigeria's, what level should the Naira be? Margaret Thatcher discussed in 1990, or that was it 1980, thereabouts, she discussed with a group of British businessmen in Singapore, and she echoed Joseph Stalin. When Joseph Stalin said that in order to destroy a country, the first thing you do is to debauch its currency. Currencies are very, very important. In order to destroy a country, the first thing you do is to debauch its currency. And recently, when Russia invaded Ukraine and the Americans put a sanction on Russia, the next thing was President Biden was mocking Russia, and he said, the ruble will soon become rubble. So currencies are extremely important. Currency is you. Currency represents you and all of that as a country. Nobody wants a rubbish currency anyhow. So I'm asking, are we in economic depression already? Because when you look at the situation of America in the 30s and look at Nigeria now, it looks very much alike. Even though I would say the edge they have against on us is that, in fact, what the Europeans and Americans could achieve as at 1700 or 1800, 1750, when the first industrial revolution started, I'm not sure we have the capability yet as Africans. We have left the organic development of our economy and productivity, and we believe that we can outsource it and basically get everything we want from abroad. Bad mistake. Bad mistake. You can't get everything from abroad. You have to find a way of producing yourself. So they used to build skyscrapers. When they started building skyscrapers in the 1800s in Chicago and later on in New York, we still don't have the capacity on our own to do many of those things. None. Maybe we'll probably never. So, but in the 1930s, what we found was the symptoms of the Great Depression were, number one, large-scale unemployment, vagrancy, vagabonds roaming around the streets with nothing to do, high crime rates. It was the time of John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde, Babyface Nelson, all those robbers sticking up banks and all of that. When you think about it, you think about, okay, Africa, Nigeria, all of those things, kidnapping and all of that. Those are the issues, high poverty rate, high, food poverty, hunger, illiteracy, that, electoral malfeasance and rigging. That was the scenario in the US as at 1930s. Okay, even into the 40s, and 50s in some areas in the US. So essentially speaking, chances are that Nigeria is still in economic depression. I think that if I was an economic manager, I would want to alarm us out of our reverie to say that, listen, maybe this is what our situation is, rather than we believing or just tagging along. If Europe says they are in economic recession, we can say, yeah, we're in economic recession. Come on. We're not at the same level. We should get real with our scenario. Anyhow, my advice on monetary policy, number one, if they ask me, I'll say they should stop increasing interest rates immediately. Stop increasing. Don't give the banks the excuse to continue to jack up their lending rates. Number two, look at the root causes of your inflation. It's only by looking at the root causes you can tackle those root causes individually. Number three, use the opportunity to boost local productivity through import substitution. We have no choice but to produce what we need to a large extent. Listen, so we group productivity products, we group them into three, but lately it's been even evolved to five. So we have the primary product. You plant mango, mango gets to gestation period, you pluck mango, you sell mango, primary product, which is what Nigeria has been doing. You have crude oil. We don't even have the capability to get the crude oil out of the ground on our own. Nobody manufactures a drill bit in Nigeria. We have to bring it from abroad. The technology is totally owned by them. We get the crude oil, we sell in the global market. We have absolutely no control. Primary product, okay? Secondary product is where you add value. So whereas that mango, same mango, you plant the mango, it germinates, gets ripe, harvest season, but you pick that mango, you sell some in the open market for immediate consumption. The remaining, you can the mango, you sun dry it by using technology, you can it or you package it, you sell to Tesco. That is secondary market. That's where we should begin to look at, because in fact, because again, we are stuck at the primary product level. We need to think of a secondary. Tertiary products are things like this laptop that we deal with. Okay, quaternary products will be things like artificial intelligence, those very technical and very technological and highly skilled things that are going on. Nanotechnology, for example, those are quaternary, fourth level kind of product. And what I saw was quinary, which is the fifth level kind of product, when scenarios, top jobs in top governments around the world. Okay. Top jobs in top governments around the world, where policies are made for every human being living. There's a kind of, they're the kind of animal that those guys are. Those are the quinary product, but we're still stuck at the primary product, and that's what we need to move on from that. So this is a good time to look at that. Then, of course, target growth, not inflation. I'm saying, listen, We can't be targeting inflation at 2%, 3%, and all of that, deceiving ourselves. What we need to do is to target growth. I would say we should target growth at double digits because we need growth, okay? And if we can target growth, inflation will fall in place. I'm not saying that. Things are in a kind of sticky situation now, and we may need to target inflation for now or do one or two things to try. And the way to target inflation, in my own view, is to look at each component of where that inflation is coming from and so on. Monetary policy can target shock therapy such as black money. I say that I'm suggesting to Nigeria, like they did in India in 2016, 2017, under Narendra Modi. And of course, he got a lot of flack from the establishment financial sector, especially in the West. I mean, for doing something that was right for his country. He realized that, look, there was a lot of black money, what they call black money that people are keeping under their bed, in their soak away and all of that in India. Of course, India is equally as corrupt as Nigeria, even if not more. Guys are always looking to get the extra here and there. And the guy said, listen, under maybe a few weeks, I'm going to change the currency. If you have money under your bed, take it to the bank. Otherwise, you lose it. That was a deluge. And today, India is gaining from that because all of a sudden, the banks got a lot of liquidity. So here we are. If they got a lot of liquidity, perhaps they'll be able to lend more to those sectors that need it. All right? Why aren't we doing that? And, Nigeria, maybe we did that in 1984 under the same Buhari, but for some reason it lost initiative this time. But I'm thinking that this would be a good thing for the next government that's coming. Corruption money, we've gone bonkers with corruption in this country. Those monies need to give them a moratorium. Forget about arresting people. Bring the money back to the banking sector. And then from that point on, you now monitor who's moving what. And you can, deploy your intelligence to pursue that and reduce corruption through that process. Corruption must reduce in Nigeria. It has to be much more difficult for people to get money, to pay huge bribes and so on. It has to be much more difficult. Let those who get contracts go back to the Oga and say, Oga, please, I can't even find the money to give you. Except they're going to take a transfer. And the man says, no, I don't want your wallet. So that will probably reduce the expectation. That is how countries evolve. America was equally as corrupt, some of these things are the things. The reason I'm suspicious that the reason why there's so much going on in Nigeria, especially like all this kidnapping, is because many of the criminal elements from Senegal, Mali, and and Niger, Chad, all sorts of people realize that Nigeria is a place where you can cash out. So they know that you can come to Nigeria, kidnap somebody, demand for 300 million, and get the money in dollars or get it in naira, change it easily on the street. So one of the things we need to do is also, if they want to get the monetary policy right, it's going to be hard. That's why I call it a shock therapy. Many of those guys hanging on the street, changing money here, Buhari, they are from the north. Buhari is not using his leverage as a northern elder. You can call these guys and say, guys, you can't continue with this. We have to draw a line here. If you give each of these guys 500,000, they will change their careers. They'll go and sell one thing or the other. And then you really criminalize the idea of changing money on the streets. In most parts of Africa, you can't change money on the streets. My friend tried to change it in Kenya. They ended up arresting the guy in Kenya. You don't change it on the street. Go to proper bureau de change where you be documented, properly documented. If we're changing $100, they probably will get your phone number, take a copy of your passport or something of that sort. And I think that if that is done, it will help our monetary policy. Lastly, slam down on insecurity once and for all by the use of finance. So, unfortunately, look at the scenario that happened in our Kaduna rail, unfortunately, and so many people were kidnapped. I think the last batch of 23 were released a couple of days back. Those guys must have got, ransom of close to 3 billion. And that money moved straight into dollar, and then moved out of this country. I mean, it's a joke. So finance is the last instrument we have refused to use against insecurity in this country. Like they say, follow the money. If you follow the money, you will break the back of these criminals. If you find it difficult to get their monies out, they will stop this business that they're doing. Anyway, I'm moving to a close now. So first, subsidy conundrum, very complicated issue. There are compromises everywhere, as you have seen. They said 9 years. Some people have been tapping the crude. It's a joke, isn't it? Because in some accounts, we lose about 1 million barrels every day. It's a joke. And for 9 years, even for God knows when, many of these things have been going. There's no way those guys who are regulators will tell us they don't know about this. It's a joke. But the only thing is this: there's a mental problem because I don't know where they take all this money to. Really, I don't know. It's just incredible. Compromises everywhere, and impossible, almost impossible now to remove this fuel subsidy. It's easier said than done. Why is it a conundrum? Number one, it's been left for too long. It's a political hot potato. It's easy to say, oh, just remove the subsidy. Yeah, remove it tomorrow. If you remove fuel subsidy in Nigeria, what will happen is, petroleum, you'll be selling at about, let's say it's even selling at about 400 naira per liter, which is just about $1. Let's say it sells for $1, okay, which is about officially maybe 450 or 430 or that amount. And when you're selling from the current 165 to 400 and something, the price of transport will probably go up ×2. And then people find it difficult to come to work. And everybody marks up by 100% or more everything they're selling, meaning that the poorest amongst us are not even able to afford the littlest of things, And what happens? Somebody has said, oh, just give them some money to tide over. That is inflation money. So the more money you spend, even if you were able to spend money and maybe increase salaries and so on, inflation will eat everything up. And it becomes a cycle because the moment that goes up, the naira will fall further against the dollar, and $1, mind you that we're benchmarking against the dollar. So if $1 was the price of whatever we wanted to target, and by the time $1 becomes 800 naira, the price of fuel will become 800 naira. And that will start another round of inflation. And before you know it, the naira falls to 2,000. And if the naira falls to 2,000, per liter of fuel, if you really deregulate it, will become 2,000. And the inflation will start all over again. So it's inflation sensitive, and you're likely going to get into a scenario where it feeds itself in a vicious cycle and a downward spiral, okay? A race to the bottom, like it's called in finance, a downward spiral of inflation. And then there may be a riots and government takedown. Devaluation and subsidy removal are mutually exclusive. What I mean by this is that, that in 2016, Buhari did remove subsidies. When it was 87 naira, he removed the subsidy. He went to 145 or so. People said nothing. People were like, okay, yeah, it's Buhari, let's give him a chance. But the next thing that happens was that they devalued. At the moment they devalued, the 140, okay, it was 145 or so when naira was exchanging at 199 to the dollar. And so 145 over 199, maybe that was like 80 cents or thereabout. It was manageable. The prices of crude oil was down in the global markets. But the moment we devalued, 140 became about 40 cents because we devalued from 199 to about 360. So 145 naira became about 40 cents. It became untenable anymore. And then NNPC started acquiring what they call under recovery, which was another subsidy anyway, another way of calling it subsidy. So I say that devaluation, if you really want to deregulate that market, you have to put a hold on devaluation. You have to look, in economics, that what we call dilemma, trilemma, quadrilemma, that when you have problems that you have to let one go. So you have to let one go, you have to live with one. One of the things we may have to live with is defending the naira around the band as we are right now. But if we say we want to let go of the naira and deregulate everything, we're joking. We'll continue to chase that inflation spiral that I mentioned earlier. This is just a picture of what they call fire. This is called fire in Nigeria. So essentially these guys, they basically despoil the entire environment, trying to distill their own crude oil and so on. But what this tells me is this, that if these guys can get diesel, and a lot of diesel they make gets used by machines in Nigeria, they may be dirty, but in fact, when they started going after these guys, that was when diesel prices went sky high in Nigeria recently. Okay, but why can we not do this? Our universities cannot, we've been teaching petroleum engineering, we cannot, there's no single capacity to process one, practically process crude oil, one barrel of crude oil a day in any of our universities. And we talk about modular refining. So whatever it is, the chances are that what these guys are doing, you can see here in those drums, you can see this liquid that's trickling into that bucket. Okay, that's just the distillation. These are the diesel. Sometimes they get kerosene, sometimes they get whatever from it. So it's not a big deal as we make it look. It's not a big deal. But if these guys can do it, rather than let them destroy the environment, probably should standardize some of these operations. We're not using our head in Nigeria. That's just a simple thing about it. Other key reasons: there's a scam around daily usage. I found out that is it 45 million liters we consume of petroleum every day, or 60 million, or 93 million? It's a huge joke. Those guys are just running circles around Nigeria and all of that for too long. All these guys in NNPC and co. Anyhow, but the point is this, that I realized that, when they say that the amount of crude oil taken out of Nigeria is so much, let's say our own use is 45 million, the remaining 40 million is taken out. It's a lie. I realized that Nigeria's usage of, you can check on Google, there's something on Wikipedia that I saw, which also, of course, is reference. So it's not everything Wikipedia that must be discounted. When you look at Wikipedia, go down to the source of that article. You'll be able to tell whether it's from a credible source, and you can investigate further. So I found out that the daily consumption of Nigeria of crude oil is 316,000. Okay, according to international sources. Let me see if I could get that article and show you guys very quickly. Okay, so it's just this one. So essentially, now this is like list of countries by oil consumption. Total oil world production about 100 million barrels every day. US consumes 19.7, European Union 15 million every day, China 14 million, and so on. Now go down, and in fact, you can tell the size of an economy by the amount of fossil fuel that they consume. So it keeps going down. Vietnam consumes 528, more than us. Nigeria is somewhere number 42 at 316 by 2015 estimates. The rest are 2019. Most of them they still be on that same average. Algeria consumes about 454,000, South Africa 569. And those economies are a little bit more sophisticated than Nigeria. But where is Cameroon? Our neighbors, okay? You see that, in fact, Cameroon is like 29,000. So Cameroon consumes 29,000 barrels every day. Benin Republic, 29,000. Niger Republic, about maybe 15,000 or something that ridiculous. Togo, 28,000. Niger, West Niger here. In fact, you probably will not find them very easily. Niger, 5,000. So where is it that we say we smuggle these things to? Because what is smuggled, it cannot be consumed by even our neighbors twice removed. So it's just a scam. Some guys just sit down and say, oh, this is what we have lost and what have we. Anyhow, if we look at the heist of 2011, there's a lot of shenanigans in that sector. This slide tells us the average consumption per capita. You can see that Nigeria is like 0.00 to 115, or let's say we are somewhere on that lighter region. But those who are beside us are very low consumers, very, very low consumers of fossil fuel. Ways forward, and I think this is my last slide. First, we need honest leadership and strong leadership as well. We have to use multiple approaches on this crude oil thing. We have to use technology, carrot and stick. We have to come down hard on people. We have to have double checks, triple checks. You have to keep changing people around until we get to the bottom of it. We have to look at local refining. Luckily, Dangote refining is almost on board. I hope it comes on board. On this fire thing that we're talking about are things that we could standardize, and also those of us who are educated in universities should be able to do more than just blow grammar and tell them how we learned only theory. We need to change the curriculum. Even ASU comes into play. Many of our professors are people who would rather not have any change from the theoretical curriculum that they've been using. They just want to continue with what they have been used to, and which is unfortunate. I said, well, it's best to deregulate after taming these monsters. You can't tame all the monsters. The one you can, you tame, and then you can deregulate. If you deregulate now, given all the cheating and all the robbery that happens in this sector, you're just going to leave Nigerians open to further exploitation, and it'll be very unfortunate. So when done, you can be less sure of exploitation, and then market forces can take control, or rather than if you don't create control, market forces could create disaster. And so thank you for listening, gentlemen and ladies. And I'm done. Thank you very much for that.
Wow, thank you so much. That was that's on another level. I just want to say very huge thanks, because you put so much so much together into that session that it's almost like one's head was spinning, and there are quite a lot of problems you identified, and also because for me, I mean, you touched on it very succinctly, the managers of our economy, and of course you've got the central bank that manages the monetary policy and defends the naira, and you've got the Minister for Finance, who, and the Ministry of Finance, and of course the economic team and co, who determine and work around the fiscal policy. But my worry, before we start taking questions from our members, my worry is that persistently there seem to be, of course, normally, in many cases, you've had loads of people who do appear incompetent from outside. I mean, people have called into question Mrs. Usman, the capacity to actually deliver, because the former lady who had to leave because of the NYSC saga, somehow there was that impression that the economy was actually going in a specific direction. It's like a manager putting a team out, and straight away you can identify, yes, they're not getting it yet, but you can see there seems to be a new tactical plan, and they're working to something. So it doesn't appear to exist. And you see the two different units working at cross purposes for Nigeria. And of course, you did mention that all these policies, these textbook policies that continue to be used, once inflation is going down, interest rates. What how can we get this right? And for me, I want to question, for someone like you, are you able to talk to people out there? Are they listening? Or is it just a case of, is it a political decision, just do this? Because of course I did listen to a speech where the president himself on October 1st, he was defending it as well, the rate increase. So are people up there, are they really listening? Because the real sector is being stifled. Things are just not going right at all.
Yes, well, thank you. Well, what I do, there's only one life to live. So what I try to do is to put all of my ideas out there. I write for 4 newspapers every week. I'm pushing these ideas, and sometimes it begins to, I know they listen to some of the things I write. They read them. The central bank governor, the guy reads me so often. The minister, I've had a few interactions with her. Unfortunately, like I said before, I think where they missed it this time, the energy level of the president was not very high in terms of, however, it came with some level of arrogance as well. In 2016, when the crude oil prices went down, that was the time he said that those who had their children abroad should go and withdraw them from schools. And he was challenged that, look, well, your own children are there. And he said, well, some of us can afford it. Those kind of arrogance. They are sending the wrong signals, and people believe that this guy is a fake, and, why is he asking us to do what he won't do himself? And he said that people who were sick and wanted to go abroad for treatment, they shouldn't sell them money. They should go and look for their money outside. When you say that, what you're doing is you're fueling the black market outside, However, you get into a plane and go to London for 160 days and stay there without accounting to anybody. I mean, that level of arrogance, a leader will lose trust. And when you lose trust, everybody begins to game the system and do whatever. So again, the truth is also that in a way, it may not be very difficult to bring us back on track, and a lucky leader that's just slightly cerebral and can garner the trust of the people and also be decisive, knowing where he wants to go to, listening to good advice, and also having a mind of his own, may be able to begin to turn this economy around. And I think also, whereas this regime hasn't done very well, but there's also a few things they've put in place that may be benefited by an incoming government. Maybe some of these things like this fuel subsidy issue, if local production can ramp up on a private sector level like Dangote thing, it could solve quite a bit of problems. At least we may not import as much as we used to a large extent, so it's one of those things. But that's it basically. But in general, many of them who run the economy, they've become dislinked from the system. I mean, even before these people who came Joshua and this lady here, we've mostly had our economic managers coming from IMF, World Bank, Goldman Sachs, and co. And indeed, the truth is that, those ones can't be really bothered really about some of our granular local challenges. We have to think for ourselves. And of course, I put it back down to intellectuals, and all of you here are intellectuals. We've been to one or two universities, have one or two degrees or professional. We have to put everything we have out there. My own is this: I don't have to be called, come and be a minister or DG. What I have, I put out there immediately, because, I've seen many, but the graveyard is full of great ideas of people who probably, most of them, never put those ideas out. And that's a waste. So whatever it is, just push it out there, But I think that, like I said, I think I want to, one of the most important things I said tonight is fly over Africa. Just 2-3 days ago, some guys in Harvard called me it was an Harvard alumni. They had a Nigerian independence discussion of some sort. So I went and spoke to them, and I was shocked when someone said, no, one of them in question and answer time said, should we not be reducing the population of Africa? So what do you mean by that? Africa is really underpopulated, if you ask me. I mean, we have much more land mass than India and China, put together, perhaps. And here we are, we're just 1 billion people in Africa. And even that billion, even Nigeria, I'm not sure Nigeria is up to 210 million, because a lot of politics came into it. People started increasing their population to get more from the federal government. All sorts of things happen, But when you fly over Nigeria, you see that this vast land, there's so much you can do with it, even from an agricultural point of view, or in terms of even adding value, even tourism. There's so much that can be done, So I think that we get to that point, but you keep pushing out ideas. Your kind of groups focused on ideas, focused on intellection and all of that are very, very important to how quickly we get out of this. And I've shared my paper, so anybody could, if you want. I've shared it on chat, so you could actually.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna, there are a few questions already pending, so I'll go to them and we'll take them one after the other. And I want to encourage, I'm sure one or two might want to contribute and speak, say something. If you're in that category, can you just raise your hand, use the hand tool, and of course we'll recognize you to do a very short, to ask a very short question or to make a comment. But otherwise, if you don't want to say something, just put your question or comment in the chat and we'll take all of them. Now I've got this. These things are general, but why is Nigeria worse? My supposition is that when you were talking about, all the things, the inflation worldwide and the things caused by COVID and governments having to essentially pump money into the economy to reflate it and also. So I believe that relates to that. So why, if these things are general, why is Nigeria worse? That's question one there. Question two, please explain importer inflation better, doctor. I believe this person meant imported inflation better. Question three, President Buhari said the Naira debt is higher in last few months. Please, what can be the source? That's, and then I believe we have a fourth question. You mentioned banks don't obey interest rate signal from CBN. Can't they be punished? Then they're giving loans to people to japa. But if you say you want loan to run good factory, they will refuse to give you, so I mean, this seems to be a personal grouse or something, so you have all
I'm very surprised that they are giving loans to people to japa. But I mean, that would be a very great product. And a lot of people will get the loans anyway. A lot of people are jackpotting from Nigeria presently. Very interesting. So I'll start with that last one. Yes, the government, the CBN can punish them, but it may not be a case for punishment really than what they call moral suasion. Because what the central bank demands from each bank is to say, listen, what's the basis of your interest rates you're charging? So they call it risk-based interest rates. So the banks should now say, listen, based on the risk that I'm taking, giving this person this loan, I need to price it at this level because the person has not a very good credit record. This business is a bit of risky business and so on. The banks should probably be able to wriggle out of anything that you confront them with in this regard. But all the same, like I said before, for example, on savings rates, the central bank had to force them.
Please just bear with me. I'm going to have to.
Is speaking.
Please go on. Yeah, go on.
Right. So essentially, so recently they had to force them just by a simple note to say, listen, increasing interest rate on savings to 4%. And they had to comply. The central bank is that powerful, but of course, when it comes to dealing with them or forcing them to do stuff or even disciplining them, that's not a problem. They can always do that, but it hasn't got to that point yet. Now, also, Naira debt can be higher. In fact, Naira debt is higher than foreign. I think almost a 60-40 relationship, or maybe 45% foreign, 55% Naira. Why? Because it used to be much higher than that before, the Naira debt, under Okonjo-Iweala, what we did was we issued a lot of local bonds. And I remember that we used to do 16, 17% interest rates on local bond. And in fact, the same international market came and took position and they made a lot of money on our bonds. Where are you going to get 17% in developed markets? If you are using a bond, maybe 2%. And so you wonder how they break even. But when they come to Nigeria, they can take a position on the 16, 17% bond. But when Kemi Adeosun came, one of our key policies was to move Nigeria debt to foreign. She felt that, of course, foreign debts are cheaper. We were able to raise money at 7%, 6%, down from 17, 16%, which looked very good. However, in raising foreign debt, you also have to be careful about what they call exchange risk, because I would have thought, I think that it's not a very wise thing, because though we raised money then, but we were raising money when it was 199 to the dollar. Now we have to, if we have to repay today, we have to go and look for money at 450 or thereabouts. So, and that means that for every $1 you collected now, you have to work twice as hard in Naira in order to repay. So everything comes with its own risk. So yes, Barry may be right that Naira debt is higher than foreign debt. Absolutely, that's where I think it's coming from. Things are worse in Nigeria because, okay, now let me deal with this. Imported inflation, yes, like I said, it's pretty easy. Just remember that since the country is import dependent, and that means we bring in a lot of things from abroad for use in this country. Almost everything around us is imported in Nigeria. Almost everything we have. Look, the computer I'm speaking from, the shirts on my body, the chair I'm sitting on, the TV, the laptop. Oh, and let me tell you this, I've done some research around our import-export profile. Our biggest import in Nigeria on a yearly basis is technology. These phones, these laptops, these TVs, these things that we can no longer do without, okay? And Nigerians are very incredible people. Our people use some of the most expensive phones ever, and they pay cash. You see students in university, many of them girls, okay, I'm not, using iPhones worth a million naira, Samsung worth 1.5 million naira, and somebody has paid cash for that, and many people are carrying 3 phones, 4 phones up and down. I don't understand. Abroad, where you guys, many of you live, you know, you have to get these things by contract. Nobody pays. So, why will our problems not be worse when we're living as if we're in a different universe? Okay, the white man that introduced this economy to us does not spend like that. There's no space to spend like that. Therefore, what you find is a scenario where a few people are spending like that, in that manner. And therefore, because they're doing that, there's so much gap between those who have, the few who have, and those who don't. And too many people are left in the rut to go and sort themselves out. So our biggest import every year is technology, all right? About 35 billion, 45 billion worth of technology is what we buy. The next biggest is petroleum products that we import. So technology is where it's at, really, you know. And we're talking about 35 billion, 30 billion, that kind of amount, you know. Then you have other things that we import, you know, manufactured goods, pharmaceuticals. But on our export side, which is where, you know, we've dug a hole for ourselves, our biggest export is, you know, apart from our petroleum, crude oil petroleum that we sell and so on, and gas, our next biggest is things like sesame seed, cocoa, 500 million. So after the first crude oil and gas, which are our only billion-dollar exports, we fall. You could see the fall down to the million-dollar area. Cocoa, 500 million average every year. Then sesame seed, ginger, you know, soya bean, you know, this thing, what they call ori now, what's it called? You know, shea nuts, and shea butter. So essentially, now, so you can actually knock off our crude oil export and knock it out with our petroleum, refined petroleum import. They knock each other out. So we are left, if you cancel those ones out, we're left with this technology, pharmaceuticals of about 3 billion that we import every year. Some ridiculous things, you know, that we import every year. Technology of 35, 40 billion, pharmaceuticals of about 2, 3 billion. Things like milk, substrates, milk, we import about $900 million every year, you know. Fish, we import about 800 million every year. But on this other side, what we're pushing out is cocoa, 500 million, shea butter, seed oil, sesame seed, groundnut oil, groundnuts, and so on. They're just in the 300 million, 200 million. So you see a country that's in trouble. That's a long-term balance of payment crisis that we're having to. So it's going to be worse in Nigeria. Maybe not the worst around the world, but one of the worst around the world because of our legacy issues, because we're not thinking right, because we are basically quite reckless, because we're not ready to change, because everybody is not interested in the collective. We're very great with personal development. That has to be said. We build some of the best houses around the world. Many of you have those houses here already, you know. Those of you who don't, when you come, you see those mansions that we like to live in. We're great with personal development. We use the best cars, even though we don't produce anything, and so on. But when it comes to collective development, we fall. Okay, you see an average Briton, for example, he lives in a hovel. He lives under the steps somewhere, but they ensure that Leicester Square or Trafalgar Square or somewhere, you know, they are looking pristine. So we bring our money to come and spend there. So they develop the idea that, look, you know, our collective heritage must be maintained in a certain way. It doesn't matter where we come from or where we stay. You know, the bottom line is not to focus on ourselves. And I think that that's part of why we seem not to understand development, and we seem not to understand how life works yet as Black people and as Nigerians. And I think this is what is, because when I discuss this issue, I take it to a very kind of philosophical level to stand back and say, well, what exactly is wrong with us? But I think that I don't know it all. I think other people should also weigh in, and maybe we can figure it out together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You really, I believe those who asked those questions, I believe Doctor has done justice to. Okay, well, there are quite a few more, and of course, you know, there is. Oh, this is Benga Shodunke. Well, meanwhile, Benga, let me congratulate you. You know, he developed. This is an indigenous. He leads an indigenous company that. Actually developed the platform that's where the streaming platform for the streaming platform for the platform NG, the program they had on October 1st. That was you know, usually you see the of course it's good to have Facebook streaming, to have all the other specialized streaming platforms, but you know, having a localized one. So Benga Shodunke and your team, congratulations for that. So he's written it. Could you share the data that shows the list of imports in Nigeria? I'll be glad to have such to have access to such data, well researched. Well, I'll leave that to Doctor, but I know that in Nigeria that we even do some specialized toothpicks as well. I do recall being abroad once and then had a visitor at a point, and the wonderful, very close a family member actually insisted on going to Costco on the day before this person was due to go back to Nigeria, going to Costco to buy toothpick, you know, toothpicks, specialized toothpicks, and they really look nice when you get them in toothpicks. And I remember having that discussion, and that person saying to me, you know, when guests come to your house and they see this, you know, it's part of, you know, it shows that, I mean, you've got some class, you know, so toothpicks, and that's what I mean, you know, you put the car on the road to drive all the way to Costco to buy toothpicks. So let me leave that with you, Doctor.
Incredible. Yeah, so I will, I think I've tried to share one of them, if I'm not mistaken. I've shared the import one. What I have is, you know, the aggregates, you know, the aggregates of import and export, so that you can see yourself, you know, where the numbers are. I'm looking for the export one. I hope I'll be able to get it. Now, regarding, there's this 40-something item that the central bank, you know, place some sort of restriction on. And, you know, some of them include that toothpick. And people would always make trouble and say, why did they just throw everything open? So we have, you know, we are in the vice grip of what they call, you know, neoliberal economists. You know, they are the ones that have always run this economy, you know, in a way. And these guys will say that, you know, what's the point? You know, just throw everything open for everybody. And I think it's a deadly thing to do. I mean, why would we insist on importing toothpick, for example? Part of what we have been told not to import is also water. There are people who insist on importing their water in this country. You know, yeah, okay, yeah. I think I found something on Excel. Nigeria export import. You can always expand it. Things like water, things like you know, all sorts of ridiculous things. Vegetables, mere vegetables. So the truth is this: okay, should we open up our market and say, you know, you can import your spinach from Tesco? And indeed, of course, we may not have any choice. As a matter of time, we may not have any choice but to throw everything open and say, you know, bring whatever it is you want, you see. But I think also we could, yeah, I've sent the Excel file.
Thank you.
It is currently in use. Oh, okay. I said I could find a way of taking it to PDF and then send it. Anyhow, so yeah, so it's one of those things. So I mean, I personally support that Nigeria should put more, look, call it archaic economics. Look, we haven't arrived yet. You know, one of the biggest problems a Nigerian has is that before we arrive, we want to show ourselves. Well, I've arrived, we want this and that. We're always looking at the optics. You know, it has to be good. You have to think that I've made it. The white man thinks opposite. He will achieve so much, you won't know. He doesn't have to go with so much air. And so here we are, we criticize leaders for putting, I saw the Imo State governor's motorcade the other day, probably had like 40 SUVs on the road. But the thing is that if we, who are not in government yet, don't see anything at our level, we don't see anything wrong we're showing off at that level, there's no guarantee that when we become governors, we'll be different. That's the truth. We're just criticizing those because they are not us. But what I've seen about our attitude and our outlook to life thus far is that if we got to that point, we will also behave without much recklessness. So anyway, let the discussion continue. Let me look for the there's this thing that I wanted to share about the list of those banned items. So you can see yourself that look, you know, of restricted items. You can see that, you know, there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to manufacture those things ourselves if we were a serious country. In 1750, Europe had started to do great things and produce the things that they needed. That was called the First Industrial Revolution. Now they're talking about the Seventh Industrial Revolution, molecular engineering, Seventh Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is the artificial intelligence and so on. Okay, third being the one powered by the internet. The second was powered by electricity. First by steam engine. Fifth, God knows whatever it is. You can always search that on your own. 5th, 6th, 7th. We haven't even started our own first industrial revolution, and without starting that in first industrial revolution, we're not going anywhere. That's the truth. That's the truth. We're not going anywhere. Yeah.
Thank you so much. While you're looking for that, Doctor, let me just there was I think it was 2021, a U.S. United States Agency for International Development report actually did say, I know there's a question from Tope Fasua there. I will come to that. It says Nigeria's economic potential is constrained by many structural issues, including inadequate infrastructure. Of course, that's very well stated. Tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, obstacles to investment, lack of confidence in currency valuation, and limited foreign exchange capacity. Of course, in response to this, the government decided that a broad-based economic growth and poverty reduction policy were the natural answers to all these issues that the United States, USAID actually raised. I want to know what your perspectives are on this, and I go over it again. It says Nigeria's economic potential is constrained by many structural issues, including inadequate infrastructure, tariff and non-tariff barriers to trade, obstacles to investment, lack of confidence in currency valuation, and limited foreign exchange capacity.
Yeah, well, all of those are issues, but oftentimes some of those things are stated from their own perspective of what they think matters. You can see there's an emphasis on the need to price Naira properly, to price the exchange rate, make it available. So, and that is the premise from which many times we pick up from in these parts of the world. But I think what we should do more is to drill down. We know look, I put it this way, like nobody can know Nigeria more than Nigerians. Nobody can know we more than we know ourselves. That's the truth, So they are right. If you look at it, you say, okay, yes, okay, Nigeria is not able to get, foreign direct investment in and so on. Well, when you talk about foreign investment, for example, okay, and let me tell you this, I did my master's in the UK. I stayed for a bit, and so I know one or two things, being a financial markets person. A lot of what is called foreign investment, all sorts of money that have been made over time in those parts of the world, in Europe and America, some of them made from slave trade, some made from colonialism. And so these monies have become funds. And as they are funds, they need to find where to birth. They need to find where to birth. So it's just good and fine if they can birth in Africa and they get a premium for coming to Africa. So to that extent, we are providing havens for them. So they're not doing us any favor per se. But what about our own? If okay, so Nigerians travel abroad in government, they say they're looking for foreign investment. Oh, they have this road show. They want to go and talk to this Mr. Smith and all of that. But the point is this: even our own people are not keeping their own money in Nigeria. So if you're not keeping your own money in Nigeria, I mean, I can imagine they go to some of those places and they're talking to Mr. Smith and say, you know what, you have to bring money, give us investment in Nigeria and co. But on the other side, they're saying, you know what, please, Mr. Smith, I want you to help me because I have some money to keep. So can you help us with getting a good account that we can, I mean, it used to be much, much easier in those days. Now it's a little bit more difficult, okay? Because of anti-money laundering laws, combating financing of terrorism is becoming. But you know what has happened now? I understand that since Europe has made it more difficult for Nigerians to open account, Dubai is also giving us some problems. Recently, about bans and so on. Now, Nigerian big men are taking money to African countries. Anywhere we go to Kenya, if you can take, I mean, it's like a curse, right? Look, because again, it's not as if Europe, America, they were not corrupt. They were even more, they introduced the concept of corruption to us as is. But one thing that they were sensible to invest their money in their own country, they had that level, that degree of patriotism. I'm not saying that people should steal money, but hey, be sensible because cash flow is cash flow. A dollar is a dollar, So yes, all of the things that they said is right. What we need to do is to build on that and then prioritize it properly. So let's look inwards. Like I said, they will never advise you to do import substitution. They will never advise you to lock down your system and ensure you actually produce one or two things for yourself. They will never. They'll tell you, liberalize everything, open up your system, and of course, because again, you don't expect them to give you better advice that will hurt their own system. We killed our textile industry in Nigeria. We have no textile industry anymore. 1985, 86, we went down the liberal route. We did SAP, okay? And now we can't even clothe ourselves anymore. But why is it that major places where the major textile hubs in the world, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, that's Axis, former old India. Mahatma Gandhi died for the textile industry. When he used to tie this, what's it called now? Dhoti, that white cloth that he tied. It was the white cloth that Indian factories could make. And the white men, they hated him for it because they wanted them to still continue importing textile from Scotland. And the guy said, no, my people, let us wear what we have. And today, that region has consolidated in the world as the place where the world population has grown. Almost every cotton you put on your body is maybe sewn in that place or put together in that place. So here we are. So we've liberalized. Well, we haven't arrived. So we must know. I think we're back again to the issue of knowing when we have arrived and knowing when we haven't arrived. I've shared something, a JPG, on the summary I did on our import and export. I hope it's useful.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So Benga, Doctor said he's already shared that in the chats. Do let us know if you need anything else, but obviously I believe that should satisfy for now. There are other questions there. I don't know if this is a question or a comment from Toluta Amola. I think if national character is not defined, I doubt we can have a national goal. Let me leave that to Doki to see what you.
What you're saying in essence for me is that we need philosopher kings, right? And however, in the absence of philosopher kings, why aren't our philosophers coming together? Who are modern day philosophers in Nigeria? They are musicians, they are comedians. Many of our youth will follow Davido and Wizkid and, listen to all the songs about making 30 billion and blings and women and fast cars and faster women, than they would listen to the convener or my humble self. I have nothing to offer them. I'm slow, they want a fast life. So, but when you say it about the national character, it's a fluid statement. And mind you, I usually try to urge people not to fall into that idealism. that we need to have that perfect situation. Do you know that the Americans say in their constitution, they say, listen, they want a more perfect union, and it's engraved. And what that means is that a union will never be perfect because you'd always shift the goalpost. When the Americans who we copy their democracy today, when they put their constitution together in 1776 or thereabouts, what they did was to, they did it as much as they could. They put we the people. But was it we the people? It was they the aristocrats. People like George Washington and John Adams and the few people who came together to put that constitution together, they were landowners, they were aristocrats, they were moneyed men, they were generals in the military, and they took decision on behalf of everybody else. However, they've amended that constitution 27 times. The first constitution said that a woman could not vote. They didn't amend that until maybe the 11th or 12th amendment. Of course, a black man could not vote. Who are you to say you want to even vote? They considered the black man as 3/5 of a human being in that constitution. That a black man is not fully a human being, it's only 60%. All right? And of course, forget about voting. Even a white man that does not own land could not vote in that first constitution. If you can only vote if you own land, but they've amended 27 times, and there are more amendments coming up. So let us not think that until we have what is called, let's say, a national character. I think that national character may be something that would come. I think that what we need to maintain is the ability to keep talking. We, in Nigeria here, we talk about restructuring a lot. Restructure. My own position is, look, you will never have a perfect structure, just as you will never have a perfect constitution. And so what you should have is to write restructuring into your constitution to say, every 4 years, we will restructure. Every 4 years, we will look at our constitution again to see whether it is delivering the best it can for the people. And the people will be part of that discussion. And so we will have a more perfect union, a more perfect constitution that will deliver for the people. The bottom line should be the people. Because you may say, oh, let's restructure, yeah. Oh, let's have state police, okay, fine, it looks good. But remember that in the 50s and 60s, for example, in the north of Nigeria, they had all these regional police. It was we in the south that said, no, we want a national police. Now we have changed our mind. We don't want a national police. Let there be state police. Let there be community policing. So chances are that whatever amendment we do in 20 years' time, we have to think that far. The Americans are thinking 100, 200 years. The British are thinking 100, 200 years down the line. We also must at least begin to think 50 years down the line. So, whatever it is as ideal today may become, suboptimal tomorrow. And we may need to change that situation. So I think the best thing is to say, listen, every 4 years, we will look at our constitution and see whether it's delivering for the people. Have we taken more people out of poverty, out of illiteracy? Is our economy growing faster? Why is it not? What is it in that constitution that may be hindering that? So if we have, let us have more money going to oil-producing states. Let us have more money going to communities. Let us free up some aspect of the constitution so that states and local governments will do better than they're doing, rather than the federal government. For example, perhaps we can take a constitutional amendment, but I wrote my last article was to say that, listen, the idea of federal universities is a misnomer in a federalism. It's a colonial hangover. When the white man was going, he said, okay, let us put some universities in place for this people. And you must give the white man, especially the British, some credit for that, because the French are not that magnanimous. Go to French countries here, colonial countries here, you see that they don't have central bank, they don't have currencies of their own. France collects their reserves, and when they want to borrow that reserve, they have to pay interest to France, punitive. I mean, they treat them like children. You go to Nigeria, you go to Ghana, you go to Kenya, you see that, okay, there's some sort of freedom, especially Nigeria and Ghana, especially Nigeria. We are not even using our advantage. We just complain too much. We're not using that. So we need to be told that, look, the idea that the federal government will own universities and continue to create more, and then you sit on their ability to think. You sit on the ability of the university to think. By now, they should be independent universities running on their own. And, if they have to charge a little bit of fees, and then those of us who we finished from universities, we put money back in those places, sponsor children, sponsor these youths, give scholarships. That's how universities run. or put a fund together. My Ondo State University where I went, I mean, that's where you guys are, some of you from, you know. So that's how I'm heading a committee, the EPG right now. We're raising money. It's been difficult for me. In fact, today I put out on the WhatsApp that we belong, and I don't mind, please, any of you that want to join. But today I put a thing there. I said, listen, you guys are not listening to me. I'm closing this WhatsApp now. By the end of this month, I'll add my own money that I can. We are trying to rejig and retool the transcript unit so that students who leave will not have a problem. They want to go for masters, they get frustrated, and what have you, you know, and that's what we're about, you know. And I've been trying to tell people, it seems like they're not moving. So I said, okay, you know what, I'll add my own to the money that I've paid. I'll put $1 million there, I'll add 500,000 money, I'll close the thing. And whatever it is we can achieve, with transcript unit, we achieve. So the future of universities is private. It's private. They're going to be owned. In fact, state university. One man, that ASU president, said something about something quack universities. I realized that in fact it is state universities that are legit. It's in America, it's state-owned universities. Okay, then you know you can have university owned by Methodist Church, by this one, by that one. You can have all those things going on. NGOs owning universities, private universities, and so on. You know, some commercial, some NGO based, and all of that. But there's no federal university in the whole of the United States. Which federal university is in the UK? And that's not to say that the federal government cannot support universities or have a fund for education. But in terms of ownership, you have to free these people. So there's going to be, you know, constant changes in terms of the constitution. I think it's something that must be institutionalized. And, you know, like they say, the biggest room in the world is room for improvement. And the only constant thing in life is change.
Wow, Kiyo, look, I'm leveraging on the fact that you're public right now to be saying to you that please, over the next 3 weeks or thereabout, if you can find time to come back, we'll do more of questions at that point, because there are loads of questions to ask you and your perspectives on quite a lot of issues. And of course, if not for time, I would have asked you a few questions of my own regarding, you said a few things about the policy direction of Mrs. Kemi, former Minister for Finance, Mrs. Kemi Adeosun, and, you know, talking about the borrowings that were denominated in foreign currency and moving everything to foreign currency denominated borrowing. And of course, the bonds, the Euro bonds and everything, you know, there are quite a lot of questions around those that I would love to ask, but I'll leave that for now. There's still a few more questions there. I think this person is pretty much insistent. I don't know whether it's the same person. Dr. Tope, please, why are banks not giving SME loans, but giving loans for JAPA and politicians? You know, I think we're a bit being unfair to the doctor here, because he's not the governor of Central Bank, and he's, to the best of my knowledge, he's not the managing director of any bank. But of course, I would not want to be the one saying you should answer or should not answer. I don't know if you want to take that.
No, I'm learning to, because this is the second person saying they're giving loans for JAPA, so it's something I have to investigate. You know, I didn't know that JAPA loans were very popular. You know, but what I know is that quite a few people I've heard, though, you know, collect loans from different people and use it to JAPA these days. So you have to be careful. Yeah. You know, they will tell you they want to do a business, whatever, you know, and then or they get loans from some of these fintech companies, collect, and then the next thing they're in Canada, they believe they will work and send the money, but many times they don't. You know, God help us. See, this country is not. See, there's enjoyment in Nigeria, guys, man. You know, this is where we're from. And sometimes the way you can look at it and say, hey, maybe there's a reason why God made us Nigerians, whatever it is you believe. You know, yeah, the life here is good. The weather is fairly okay. And you know, as you grow in life, you realize, according to the Maslow hierarchy of things, you can do your self-actualization easier here. You know, get known, get involved in courses and so on. And even after Maslow's self-actualization, there's a less popular theory that Maslow evolved, which is called self-transcendence. The point where you stop living for yourself. I mean, you know, these days I realize that if I travel, I don't have to buy anything for myself. I don't need anything anymore. I have all the clothes I want, all the suits I want, all the shoes I want. What do I want again? So there's a point, at least, you have to stop living for yourself. Yeah. So it's better done here. And all of these problems we have are also challenges that we can live for. 20 million children out of school. If only that we didn't have evil people running the country, that's enough problem for all of us to come together. What I've seen about Europe, America, is that they come together around their problem. Look at COVID. No matter what it is you believe about COVID, and I have my own reservations about COVID and the entire way it was run, but I saw a place like UK, they put everything, they created jobs out of it, including people that will go and knock on your door. If you're a traveler, those days you travel into Europe, they've employed some people to come and knock in your hotel to say whether you are still there. That's jobs. The NHS found out, employed so many people around COVID. So the same way the world, it's a template, the same way the world came together around COVID, we should be able to come together around, out of school children, a health sector that's not working and all of these problems that we have, my view.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And, you mentioned self-transcendence, and thank you for mentioning that. It's something that I've heard again and again, but you won't believe it. I've never really taken time to go deep into the psychological theories behind it and all this. But now that you've mentioned it, and this is a suggestion to anybody out there as well. I hope I can spend time to actually look through that. Now, a few questions there, a few questions more. Thank you. The solutions to poverty, that's from Tolu, the solutions to poverty cannot be defined by people who are not aware of the solutions that people have been using to survive. Much more localized solutions will go further than institutional solutions. So that's one. And of course, Benga, again, where can I get the docs? Can't find them in the chat. He sent his email. I believe that, okay, people are sending their emails to Doc. Yeah, I think they did not land in the chats, even though Doc sent them, but they did not land in the chats. But they've sent their emails. I'm probably going to put our official email there. So
I think you should give me your own so that I'll send it to you. You send it to them.
Okay, no
What's
problem.
I'm sending this out now.
Oh, okay, no problem. I'm just gonna put that now. Just 1 minute. Okay, I think I'm putting that in the chat now. Thank you so much, Doc. Thanks, Doc. So I'll put both of them in the chat. While you're going through that, then so the first one, of course, was this localized solutions to poverty. That I believe she's trying to say here that those who craft these solutions, these economic strategies and economic policies to combat poverty and all these things, that they cannot actually do them properly without knowing the solutions that people have developed for their survival. So much more localized solutions will go further than institutional solutions. And of course, she went for that. I agree with your use of the American people. Yes, it is very fluid, but having that united goal has kept them more grounded as a country. So and of course she also made the last comment there. Japa loans are popular, especially if you get a work visa. Okay, fantastic. So I leave that to Doctor. Those are unfortunate. Well, don't let me say unfortunate. Don't let's use a negative word. But those are the last questions we will take for today, because after that we would have to, just get our second to do the vote of thanks and we'll close the session. So Doc, over to you, sir.
Right. So basically, I think I agree with the person who said that solutions cannot be effective if they are recommended by people who don't know what people are going through. Very, very important. That's, again, talking about the fact that we have to own our own solutions rather than the ones prescribed from far away by institutional people, World Bank and whatever, whereas they have the capacity to process large amounts of data and therefore recommend things, based on data. But I mean, in the past, they've made some very egregious mistakes. That people, IMF, World Bank, they did apologize for misleading us on SAP. And oftentimes I try to compare the solutions were given in SAP, which we end up being recommended again. In 1986, we were asked to deregulate, okay? Deregulate, we were asked to reduce the public sector, sack people, they were useless. You know, what's the point? Sack people from the public sector, reduce the public sector, deregulate, devalue. And so we started devaluing the Naira and so on. You know, we should focus on banks and so on. But in 2008-9, when the markets melted down in the Great Recession, you know, 2008 is where you have what they call the Great Recession. 1930s or when you had the Great Depression. I realized that in 2008, 9, 10, they did the exact opposite. Rather than sack people, they employed more people into the public sector. Trust the white people. They employed more people into the public sector, standardized the public sector. They ensured they protected the employment sector, ensuring that people were more employed. They bailed out the banking sector. They didn't let them to fail. They bailed out the car manufacturers in the US. And in Nigeria, they tell us, let those things fail. And so we allowed Volkswagen to fail, allowed Peugeot to fail, allowed, you know, listen, you look at us as we are, producing nothing, and we tell us, they just liberalize everything, let private sector and market take over. They protected their own market. All right. So they don't have to tell you, once bitten, twice shy. If you fool me once and I am fooled, the next time if you fool me again and I'm the one that's stupid. So and they're still recommending the same thing to us. So they cannot know our challenge more than we know ourselves. That's the truth, you know. Which other question have I not dealt with? Convener, what's the second question?
Okay, let me just quickly bring that up again. So I believe you've of course, the solutions to poverty cannot, and I think to a large extent you did cover a bit of that. The solutions to poverty cannot be defined by people who are not aware of the solutions, and also, so I believe this speaks very much into, you know, the need for localized, and I know you did touch on quite a lot of them. And for me, the sharing of money, which they call the distribution program by the government. I mean, yeah, we're told that, you know, conditional transfer. How does that really help?
It's very inefficient. Very, very inefficient. This whole idea of giving people, look at, after I did it in the past, they say, for example, we have a huge problem with environmental sanitation here, right? We have pollution, plastic pollution. We behave like people who don't care. Now, so rather than you give someone 5,000 naira to go and spend money, why can't you tie it to environmental, whatever? Say, listen, go and bring me plastics from wherever you can. I'll pay you money for it. All these children will running all over the place, you know. And you can use that to, or go and plant a tree, you know, or some trees and come back and you earn some money. We have problems to solve. So why are we reinforcing laziness and tardiness? It's because oftentimes the leaders, you know, I mean, and many times that's where the presidency matters. And that's the reason I ran for presidency, not some other position. You see, the idea, if the president doesn't have an idea of one or two things that can be done, or if himself believes in, you know, freeloading, then this is what you get, you know. So why would you give money and you don't even know who? You're not even keeping records of who you give money. You go into the market, you say you're doing trader money, you give money, and even the VP got involved in that. Why should he? You know, you give money and there's no record. You don't have the data of who gave money. Nobody's paying back. You know, so I don't believe in conditional transfer. This, I mean, I don't know whatever it's called, but the idea of giving people money just for no reason. No, I don't. I believe we have a lot of problems to solve, and we should tie our efforts to you know, to those problems. If we don't rally around our problems, we'll continue to be in trouble.
Thank you so much, Doc. I mean, we've virtually come to the end of it tonight. I just want to say a very, very big thank you. You know, it's been a very, very deep, very, very enlightening session. You know, there's so much I want to, pick out, but where do I start from? Because we've touched on quite a lot of issues. We've talked about the subsidy regime, and of course, the time bomb that awaits the next government, especially if you talked about local production, that's for the petroleum subsector, for local refining. And also, if that is not working before the next president comes in, whether it be Kwankwaso or whether it be an Atiku or Peter Obi or Tinubu, it's a time bomb in itself. And of course, the interest rates and of the multiplicity of rates as well. These are things we want to, I wish we had more time to actually ask you deeper questions on them, because we continue to maintain all these different rates. So if you ask someone what is the form, of course, you did make mention of something that I haven't thought of, and I know probably a lot of people haven't thought of, that of course, one of the things that are inviting more insurgents into Nigeria is that, you could actually take your ransom in dollars, in local currency, go to the market, go to black market. If I get abokis to come to meet you in the bush and they change it for you there, so you've got your dollars straight away, no tracking, nothing. These are, and I'm like, of course, these are very, very simple things but are so deep, and many of us do not. So I am using this forum again, Doc, to invite you back some other time when you have some spare time. But of course, someone here has asked, please talk of your presidential run. Why are you not running this time around? And who is your presidential?
Should come the next time. I'm not talking about that today. They should come for the next meeting, and probably I'll talk about it.
Because these are deep questions as well. Who is your presidential pick? Well, presidential pick, I believe. I just want to say a very, very big thank you. Let's get one of our, I believe, Kantolu or Miss Olabinton, can you just do the vote of thanks on our behalf? And let's close the session. But I just want to appreciate you, Doc. You might not know it, but quite a lot of people are looking at you. They're watching you, they're following you, they're impressed. And the simplicity about you, this is what freaks me quite a lot. And I just want to appreciate you so much. Daramola Telu, please, could you unmute yourself or Olasho and just give the vote of thanks on our behalf, and we close the session. I'm unable to unmute you from my end, so you need to do that yourself.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I really, really want to appreciate the speaker today. It's been a really informative session. I think everyone has gotten a refreshing angle on things, including myself. We look forward to more experiences with you because, like the convener said, this can definitely not be a one-off. We appreciate you. We appreciate everyone that has attended, and we hope to have a very wonderful session going forward with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tolu. And Tolu, let me congratulate you for the Mentors projects that she's, in addition to being director of media, she also runs an NGO that's been doing a lot of interventions at the primary education level, and it's I want to congratulate you on the success of that program, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. We appreciate you. God bless you. To everybody who has joined us on social media or directly via this link, we appreciate you as well. May God bless you. We wish you a very